Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. This is episode number 256 with my guest, percussionist, educator, Steve Schick. If you're a percussionist, that name is very familiar to you, and I have been very fortunate to get to share the stage with him and play under his baton, also to watch him play solo music at PASIC and other sort of venues, but also have gotten to just have lovely conversations like the one you're about to hear. We talk about Steve's upbringing on a turkey farm in Iowa, to what he was like when he was 10, to his current situation where he was dealing with a triple bypass, and just his outlook on life and his view on teaching and making mistakes and being scared, and all of that was just truly inspirational. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Without further ado, Steve Schick. All right. Well, in the interest of your of time and respectful of your time, let's gavel this to order. Steve Schick, welcome back to the podcast. I believe that you had joined the podcast when I was doing the Drumming at 50 interviews. I believe you spoke on that, but that was sort of focused on one particular issue. And when I emailed you to see if you wanted to come back on, I had rebooted my podcast a couple weeks ago after taking about 2 years off, and you had a very specific thing that you requested that you're like, I want to talk about this, and we will certainly get to that. But if you don't mind indulging me first, you're somebody that, if you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
I'm 72.
72. Growing up as a percussionist, studying, coming through middle school band, fifth grade band, middle school band, high school, college, your name was sort of always in the ether as like, this is one of the forebearers of specifically solo percussion, but just contemporary percussion, and the respect for that as a like valid thing. Your name and your face was all over posters. You were at PASIC. You were all these things. But the one thing that those posters never did was tell me that, that you were once 10 years old, just like I was. Yeah. And I'm curious if you wouldn't mind telling me a little bit of what was 10-year-old Steve Schick like?
Well, first of all, can I say it's so wonderful to see you? And
Sure.
I've seen you, in fly-by encounters at festivals and on stage with drumming last summer, et cetera, et cetera. But it's really nice to have another chance to chat, Josh. So thank you so much for asking me to do this. The question about what the 10-year-old Steve was like is, the answer to that is remarkably similar to what the 72-year-old Steve is like. In fact, it's really interesting that you should bring up 10, because for me, that was a kind of fabled golden age. A time when everything seemed possible. It was a time before the complications of adolescence set in. It was a time when, I felt like I could indulge the general childhood passions of astronomy. In my case, I grew up in the midst of the moon race, etc. So the kind of aimless desire, or not aimless, but non-goal specific desire just to experience life, was really strong for me then, and it's as strong for me now as it was then. In fact, I feel like it's come back, and it is somehow that sort of sense of wonderment has survived the career issues, and I'm not even sure how that really happened. But I was the dutiful eldest son of a farming family in north central Iowa. My mother was a good amateur pianist, but she never pursued it beyond that. And, she didn't have those kinds of skills, but she was a very fine musician. My dad was a turkey farmer, and there was no thought at all that I was going to be a musician, except for this is what people did. They played piano when they played in the band, and percussion was, or the drums, as they said, was in the drum section of the band. Was my choice. So I never really thought that music would be a career path. In fact, I was intent on becoming a doctor, a physician, and I did that through my first year of college. Took all the science courses, and it was eventually my C- in biology that sealed the decision not to become a doctor. But by then I was really quite a committed musician, and trying to figure out how to work through the tension between what increasingly I felt like I wanted to do with my life and what my parents thought that I should do with my life. And they were very loving, not completely understanding at first, but eventually supportive of my choice to be a musician.
Well, we
But I'm fascinated that you used 10 as an example because I think about the 10-year-old me. To say it every day is not much of an exaggeration. Or I
mm,
think about the animus of someone who is the anima of someone who is trying to find his way in the world and doesn't know particularly where to go, but is
mm.
interested in perhaps too many things and trying to make sense of it all.
So when you were 10, we jumped from being 10 to going right into med school, but like, and then getting a C plus. But when you were 10, was this the sort of farm in Iowa where like your nearest neighbor was 2 miles away, or was there a neighborhood that you grew up in?
Yeah, both. We lived on a farm for my earliest years,
Hmm.
and but by the time I went to kindergarten, we had moved into a small town. So I had both the experience of living on a farm, and I do remember the farm, not very much, of living there. But then my dad commuted to the farm. It was all of about a 15-minute drive,
Hmm.
basically out
Hmm.
into the country. So I worked on the farm throughout my childhood, through high school, for sure. But I didn't have the idyllic farm memories. In other words, there
Mm.
was never an end of the day pastoral scene sitting on the porch having lemonade, looking out
Well,
at the work we've done. No, I was really only ever there to work. And then we went back into this little town of Clear Lake, which is where I went to school, et cetera, et cetera. So I had a kind of a weirdly bifurcated childhood, but I identify most strongly with the farm as in terms of
well,
my experience as a kid.
it's funny you say that you didn't grow up with the idyllic thing. I wonder if there is such a thing as an idyllic farm experience. Everybody I know that was working on a farm, it is a lot of work.
Oh my God, it's an amazing amount of. I think the only idyllic aspects are when the work stops, and it just so happened at that moment that I was in a small town and not still on the
I
farm.
mean, my wife and I just bought a home in Yardley, Pennsylvania. We have about 3/4 of an acre, and the
Oh,
amount of
great.
time, Steve, I'm just mowing and trimming, and it's like that
Yeah.
alone. I'm not like dealing with animals. I'm not fixing fences, like those sorts of things. Like, anyway, I want to defend your. I think what you had was a pretty accurate farm experience from what you're
Yeah.
saying. From what you're saying.
Well, we had 50,000 turkeys, so this was not a small, it was a family farm,
Hmm.
but it
Hmm.
was a really busy, full-on thing. And by the way, this is the standard joke I tell is that working with 50,000 turkeys prepared me very well to teach in a university. And I'm thinking of my colleagues and of my students now.
Yeah, no, 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 no. Yeah, we won't delve into those politics
Oh,
too deeply.
that's enough said
Um,
about that.
the so you said your mom was an amateur pianist, and
Yeah.
obviously your dad was a farmer. What was there conversations in your house growing up of like this is a thing you could do for a living, or like when did that first seed sort of sprout out of your brain of like I don't know, this is I'm when was your first sort of Steve Schick musical experience that clicked for you and you were like this is what I want to do?
Well, there are a couple of them, and including some when I was a kid, like in that age we're talking about, of just having musical experiences of playing with a band or hearing a concert that were really meaningful.
Hmm.
But in terms of a kind of career moment, it was really relatively late. In other words, I there was no conversation with my family about whether music was the possibility for a professional life in music existed because
Hmm.
that was never even remotely a thought. And in fact, when it looked like I was heading in that direction, there was a lot of yeah, no, I'd say a lot of resistance, and then a little bit of a cold period in the family where my parents clearly loved me, but they didn't understand what I was doing. And especially,
Mm.
it wasn't just that I was a musician. I was a percussionist, and not just a
Mm.
percussionist. I was a percussionist playing contacta. Like this made no sense to them
Yeah.
at all. And I understand that. It doesn't make a lot of sense, and it
Mm.
must have been really hard for them. But one of the early moments was but I was in my early 30s by this point. I had studied, I'd gotten a Fulbright. Those things were all positive signs to my family and to me
Hmm.
as in terms of a life of in musician as a musician. And I'd won the Kranichstein Prize and the Gaudiamus Prize when I was a student in Freiburg. But the thing that was really for me a kind of culminating moment of that early period of life was playing at the 25th anniversary of the PAS, Was that right? Yeah, it must have been. That was held in Washington, and they asked me to play a solo concert. And it was at the Kennedy Center. And not only was that this amazing moment to kind of try to coalesce a repertoire that I'd been working on and present it for people that had not heard me play live, but it was also a time when my family, realized I wasn't going to move back in the basement. I wasn't this. This was a certain kind of sign of having succeeded. And it was a really important moment. That was in 1986. So I guess I was 32 at that time.
Okay.
So not a kid.
Yeah.
And I'd gone through school. I had 3 degrees. I'd won those competitions. I'd gotten a job at Fresno State. So many things had been going right. But the life I thought I wanted in music, which was really one of playing concerts at the highest possible level, that was the first moment where I thought, oh yeah, this could actually happen.
Were you said playing for a bunch of, you were PAS, for those of you that don't know what that is kind of like the Star Trek convention for percussionists.
It is.
And
Comic-Con.
So it's a lot of people in the know. And it's interesting to me that you said that for a lot of people that have never seen you play live, were you performing concerts prior to that, or was this like you were at home practicing, dreaming of this, or like what was your lead up to pacing?
No, I had played actually quite a number of concerts, and but always kind of nibbling around the edges of things. And actually, the most important concerts I'd done were in Europe, and so my experiences of playing concerts in the United States were relatively small. I played concerts in and around Iowa City, which is where I went to school, but that included going to the University of Illinois and different places. So a few little outreach concerts. I'd played a few concerts in California because I was a faculty member at Fresno State University. And then the highest profile concerts were mostly in Germany at that point. So the Percussive Arts Society, which is indeed a Star Trek convention for.
I mean that in a positive sense, not as no dig, just as true.
No, it has its ups and its downs, but it has been for me a really important thing, and if not the least of which is for this moment in which my counterparts, mostly better established counterparts, I had a chance to play for them, speak to them, and it was a kind of in the day of the PASIC convention in which there were focal concerts that everybody came to, and so I was lucky that I wasn't, at a 11:30 in the morning where 9 other things were taking place. This was
right.
the time that everybody came, and I probably, without Tom Saiwi, who was president at that time and who was the person who invited me, there was no way that I would have gotten onto a slot like that. But he offered it to me, and on the strength of my concert that I'd played the year before in Champaign-Urbana, and there was that, and so that then gave me the courage to do what I don't even know if people do this anymore, a kind of New York debut concert. But I had one at Merkin. I played a number of concerts. And then I kind of thought, oh, well, great. Now everything's just going to fall into place. And that absolutely didn't happen. It was much more, as I'm sure you know, much more a process of gradually accreting opportunities and one thing leading to another, and moments that felt like serious steps backwards. And so beyond that Kennedy Center moment, there weren't things that were like, okay, now you have arrived. It was just this sort of steady thing.
I'm really glad that you bring it up in that particular way, because I think it sort of relates to the idyllic farm experience. People, like, I had this feeling when I would see pictures of you or Nexus or Evelyn Glennie. It's like, oh, well, they're there. They've made it.
Yeah.
And the truth is, and I've sort of been pounding this home to my students too, that like history is not a chunk of time that we then put aside and say, this was World War II or this was the World's Fair night. No, it's World War II is like 30,000 days ago. And it's like every day people are making decisions, and your career wasn't one big splash. And then from that on, your phone is just ringing off the hook. No, it's like you played PAS and at the Kennedy Center, and then the next day you're in a hotel room and your phone's not ringing in the way that you thought it would, and you're like, well, shit, I've got to get off. I got to call somebody. I got to.
One.
Yeah, whatever. You're waiting for the hotel room to ring
Yeah,
for
right. I was waiting for the
whatever.
telegram.
Right. But I'm really glad that you brought that up because I think a lot of students. I'm experiencing this now on some level. I'm only 47, but people look at me and like, I want to do what you do. I'm like, well, then get up every day.
Yeah, work.
No one's going to tell you what to do.
And actually be just stubborn enough not to stop. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
that's the thing. There was another moment, if you don't, I mean,
Please, yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't really think about these all very often, except that at Merkin Hall. And Andrew Porter, who was the critic for the New Yorker, came, and I thought, oh, well, there it is. This is the thing that's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember every summer buying, because there wasn't the internet, so I bought a copy of the New Yorker every week, thinking that it's going to be a review of my concert. Every week there was a review of somebody else's concert, and that he never actually wrote anything, in spite of the fact that he came to the concert. And so this was to me at the time this great disappointment. On the other hand, David Lang, whom I knew as a classmate at the University of Iowa, showed up to hear the concert because we knew each other. We were
Mm.
friends, and he was living in New York at that time. And he said, "Well, are you busy tomorrow afternoon?" I said, "No." And so we took a nonstop walk around the Met. In other words, we didn't stop to look at anything. We just talked. And he said,
Yeah.
by the way, we're planning this thing. It's crazy. It's probably only going to last 1 year, but we're calling it Bang on a Can. And if you would like to play in the festival, that would be great. And so this is, I think, maybe the object lesson for young players is the thing that I was sure would light the fuse turned out to be a dud. And the casual encounter with somebody whose music I just had taken seriously when we were both students
Mm.
led
Mhm.
to the enormous opportunity of playing with Bang on a Can for 10 years. And so that's the thing.
Well, the other day, I hope your ears were burning. We had our final concert at the So Percussion Summit Institute was on Saturday, and
Oh,
we featured
congratulations.
a lot of David's music. And he got up to sort of introduce himself, and he told a story about you, and he was talking about why his music is struggle isn't the right word, but the visual sort of friction that you see a physical body doing something that it wouldn't necessarily do intuitively, and then sort of focusing in on that and making that the thing that's interesting. Yes, there's a lot of interesting things about David's music, but pieces like Table of Contents or the So-Called Laws of Nature, you're just watching people hang on for dear life. And
Yeah.
it makes me think, it's like Beethoven's metronome, I don't think was broken. I think he liked to see people rip at a fast tempo.
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
you know. And David told the
It
story about there's some piece where the chimes, you hit these chimes and there's a kick drum note. I don't even know what piece it is, but
was a student piece, yeah.
and he was like, and you were like, David, can I not let the chimes ring, but can I mute the chimes right when I hit the kick drum? And he was like, okay, but why? And you said, just because it looks cooler. And and from that moment on, he was like, Steve's been in my head since that day as a student, reminding me that it's specifically with percussion, unlike maybe piano or oboe, everybody can see everything you're doing. The art of subtlety is something everybody can see right there, and it was a really interesting sort of snapshot into David as a student, but also you as a student, and sort of the seeds from when I think of seeing you play Watershed or anything. There's like every motion is thought about. You're already thinking 8 steps ahead to the next thing you've got to hit over here, but your right hand is reaching for the stick over here. Can you just talk a little bit about that sort of aspect of your playing and like where did that sort of develop and why was that so important to you?
Well, I know that story because David has told it to me, and I remember the moment. I My memory of the moment was that it was much more about the sound of the kick drum cutting off the chimes than it was about it looking good. But I'm sure I said that.
Well,
I don't.
he might have told the story with a little nuance in that, like what he cared about was how cool it looked. Maybe not. He didn't care about the sound at that point. Maybe
Well,
you cared about the sound.
I think that it was probably all of the above.
Yeah.
And David working, I mean, we were students together, as you know, and so working with somebody like him in a moment when we were, trying to discover who we were was really important. And there were other composers, and I've been really lucky from that standpoint. When I went to Freiburg, I'll get back to the question you've asked, but when I went to Freiburg to study at the Hochschule there, my classmates were Toshio Hosokawa and Kaya Sariaho.
Mm.
So I remember the first student composers concert. I thought, well, the level is really pretty good here, right? It's like Kaya, she was a fellow, so she wasn't exactly in the same role I was, but
Right.
we were roughly the same age, and she
Hmm.
was a wonderful person, and I worked a lot with her. In any event, the integration of the visual and the sort of sense of choreographic coherence came, first of all, from trying to deal with the uneven architecture, the kind of like ragged landscape of percussion. The things are at different heights.
Mm.
Especially in the 1970s and 1980s, there was far less standardization of things, and so you would, especially on tour, you would find that keyboard, the widths of the bars of a vibraphone or marimba were quite different from brand to brand, and you'd have to kind of all of a sudden adjust these crazy kinds of things. Many, stands for drums were not standardized in the same kind of way. Everything was much more ragtag. And so the ability to kind of accommodate different choreographic needs on the spur of the moment was really a part of the work from the very, very beginning. And I most of my well, the moment at which I began to tour more regularly was when I got the job in Fresno. I came back from Europe and moved to California. And then all of a sudden I could play in the United States more easily and did those concerts. So at the same time as I was dealing with this kind of jumble of sizes and shapes and dispositions within a percussion setup, I was also quite a serious student of Tai Chi,
Mm.
especially at that
Hmm.
time.
Hmm.
So how do you meld something which is a movement discipline, which is so rooted to the core of your body and which requires you to be constantly worried about or constantly conscious of your center of gravity,
Hmm.
of how you move, of how you reach, of how not to overreach, et cetera, et cetera? How do you correlate that with the kind of asymmetric percussion setup, which might in fact be different the next time you play this piece in another venue? And so that sort of tension for me, I think, is still quite present in my playing, even though now instruments are more standardized. I now play mostly on my own instruments or instruments that I already have an idea of what I'm going to get, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, yeah.
So the tension is reduced a little bit, but the sense that the body needs to be stable, the mind moves slowly, even though the hands are moving fast, is something that was kind of baked into
Mm.
the earliest days of playing.
It's really interesting. And one other thing about like when people, and again, like whether or not this is what is in the air about your sort of your legacies up to this point. One thing I always that comes to mind when I see you play, aside from the movement thing, is you basically, from my perception, play everything with four green mallets.
I do.
And of course, that's not 100% true. But every time I see you play, I'm like, how in the hell is he getting all of these wild sounds out of these four sticks on snare drum, on whatever it is? And it's actually, the question for me has now been a little answered, like in terms of how you do that or why you do that. It's like, well, a good, like on a farm, perhaps I'm drawing the wrong inference here, but on a farm, you have a hammer that works. And you have the right tool, but like you've got your socket wrench from 1918 that just works every time, and you know exactly how to do it. And I'm curious if my sort of my diagnosis of or connecting those two things, is it all related?
Oh no, you're absolutely right. I mean, and there's that metaphor to having not just the right tools, but the right number of tools,
Mm.
so
Hmm.
that you don't get lost in a kind of specialist's rainforest of
Right,
specialist
right,
jungle.
right.
But I also have this other idea that there is I don't want to let this get out of hand, but I have a theory that you have on one side of an equation an enormous number of sonic possibilities, and on the other side of the equation, an enormous number, you hope, of sonic results in as a part of a performance.
Hmm.
But it needs compression in order for it to have any power. So the enormous number of possibilities has to be run through a relatively narrow gap to pressurize it, to force in interesting limitations, to really give it the kind of force that it needs, and then it can spread out. If you have a kind of straight, big corridor between the number of sounds you've got and the number of sounds you want, and there's nothing that helps you understand that how to pressurize things, then there's no resistance and there's no tension. It's a little bit the Bernoulli principle of like when you take a garden hose and you hold your finger over or your thumb over the end of it to compress the space that the water comes out of, um, you get more force that way. And so, for example, and where I was going to go with this, I guess I am going this way with it, is this is how I look at playing the music of Cage, especially the late music, when there are an enormous number of possibilities, and again, sonic richness on the other end. One needs to find a kind of structure, even if it's an individualized one that is imposed upon the moment, in order to limit possibilities, or there will be no tension inherent in it, and there will be no force that comes out of it. So the green mallets, as you said, are one version, maybe my main version of forcing a set of limitations that actually creates the necessity to enact a kind of choreography or performance technique or something like that, where the richness of possibility results in the richness of experience. I don't know if that makes any sense.
It makes 100% sense. And I think as a young student, I'm just going to be honest, because I don't have this isn't the right word, but sometimes as a young student, you're taught like have every stick possible. And, triangles can only be played with this thing, timpani are played with this, congos you never hit with a stick because that's a hand, like all of these weird rules that everybody gets in various forms. And then I see you play and you're using 4 of the same sticks on everything. My first thought of this as a student was like, well, that's a lazy choice. But I'm too young with not enough experience to understand. I wasn't old. I wasn't experienced enough to understand. And the way you just explained it, I wish I could go back to like 21-year-old Josh and be like, dude, this is why he's doing it. Trust me. And again, lazy is the wrong word, but
no, I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
It's really, I think, as a young student, still at 47, I don't spend enough time really getting every possible sound out of everything I'm playing with just one stick. I haven't explored everything. Like, what can I actually do with this? I don't know, because I haven't sat with it long enough. Well, I can't get that sound, so I'll go grab a harder mallet. It's like, well, dude, take 5 more minutes and think about this, try out a million different things.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, please.
It's interesting to see where does the sophistication really lie? And to me, it lies in the body. In other words, even on the simplest level of how high do you raise the stick? In what kind of acceleration curve, if any, do you let it fall onto the instrument? What angle? Where does the stroke come from? When you think about the amount of nuance in the most basic stroke, you have so many more tools. And so, to me, and I'm not saying that I had this realization, but I've come to this realization that playing the same note in the same way with a different mallet is a less rich way of proceeding than using the same mallet and forcing yourself to accommodate it with bodily movements that complexify it. There's more richness in the later. And for me, it never really worked to do both. In other words, this kind of shaping with the body and changing mallets all the time felt like there was just one too many tools in the toolkit there.
Yeah.
I have preferred that. I had the experience, which I might have shared with you personally, but of being asked to design a set of signature multiple percussion mallets, and I said that such a thing couldn't exist because multiple percussion, even though I don't really like that term, but let's just use it, is the conglomeration of all of these different striking areas, surfaces, amounts of rebound, et cetera, et cetera. And a specialty mallet is perfect for one thing. But if you take that specialty mallet and you play 9 different things with it, only one of those will sound good. And the rest of them won't sound good because a specialty mallet applied to something that it is not specialized for is a dud. So if you take a kind of vanilla mallet and you can play those 9 different things, they basically all work. And then the nuance has to come from how you do it.
I thank you so much for sort of walking me through that process with the way that your brain thinks about this stuff, because the older I get, the more, like with Soci these past 2 weeks, there was a lot of folks like holding four mallets because they had to get they wanted to get four different sounds, but their time got slightly worse. It was just a little janky and a little weird. And so I was like, let's just, and I was thinking back to when I was in grad school, I was playing Rogue Ashanti by James Wood. And Bob sat me down and he said, okay, we're going to find a stick that you like the sound it makes on every individual. That piece has like 40 different things in it, And so by the end, I've got 40 different sticks here. And he's like, okay, now let's whittle this down. Can you find four of these that make the sound that is a slight compromise or adjust your sound so that it works on everything? And eventually I did. There was one thing, there's like a crotale note and there's a chime note or something. And I could not figure out how to make it work. And he's like, figure it out. And so I ended up taking the crotale beater that I really liked and taped it to something just above the crotale so I could hit the stick, the shaft of the crotale, so that then the beater struck, Not rocket science, and I'm not the first person to figure that out. But having that forced on me then, now in So Percussion, I'm like, so at Soci, I was like, just get something a little more middle ground and play with two sticks. Your groove is the thing that should feel good first. And then we'll figure out, we can keep digging deeper, but you've got 8 sticks in your hand. What are you doing? You just look like an octopus. And, and but I understand it. I understand the instinct to use that specialty mallet. And, sorry, we've gone down the weeds on this, but I wanted to ask.
Oh, no, I think it's fantastic.
I wanted to ask you too, when you play, one thing that I'm learning too as I get older, live music and my work with composers, which you've done a ton of, David Lang being one of them, I've realized how important it is to be able to play in the style of that composer, which means knowing what kind of food they like to eat, the way their voice sounds, what is talking to them, because in those moments you're being like, what is actually important to David Lang at the end of the day? Is it that you structurally nailed everything in his piece? Is it that you left out 8 bars and forgot and you stumbled around? Or is it that you left out those 8 bars, but you improv'd in the style of David Lang so well that you convinced David Lang that that's what he wrote? And I'm coming around to the latter, like knowing the composer, knowing Steve Reich, knowing David Lang, knowing Caroline Shaw. That's been my experience. And I'm curious for you in live performance, like, I'm going to assume you're not perfect. You're a human being. Like
you can readily assume.
I mean, I don't want to cast aspersions here, but I kind of want to pull back the curtain a little bit. What is your experience in performing live music when, your book talks about memorization and all those things in a really beautiful way, but what happens on a bad night? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, of course that happens. I think mistakes happen, and very often a good kind of mistake is often an improvement on the moment. There's tension involved in live performance, and I don't mean just stress. I mean there is the tension between creating a realization of a piece that is repeatable, but also making it individualized for this concert. There is the tension of representing well a composer's work, a composer that you presumably care for both as an artist and as a person, but also not losing yourself in this process. There is the tension between a kind of absolute platonic version of a piece that you might have in your head and the fact that you're playing on one night for a bunch of specialists and on the next night for children, like how do you reconcile all of these embedded tensions in the performance? And so one of the ways that those things happen is that mistakes occur when you are perhaps overloading your circuits or when there's just a simple error that this can happen. And so in terms of how to react to those moments, I think it's important to realize, first of all, it does happen. It will happen. This is part of the contract that you have. And so I'm thinking now of speaking to younger players who are dealing with, for example, stage fright issues or performance anxiety, and how that a perfect performance can only be one in which you have no regrets about the notes you played or the order you played them in. But this will happen. This is what we've signed up for. So there's a whole spectrum of, shall we just say, kind of interstitial music that you can make between the thing that you did right and the next thing that you will do right. Some of it is actual improvisation where you're trying to catch up with yourself. And there, I really do trust the mechanics of the amount of practice that I do. I like to practice. I practice a lot. I never try to do things without practicing a lot, mostly
Mm,
because I don't play very well if I don't practice a lot. And the practicing for me is the practice. The concert is the result of the practice. So
mhm.
that means that if you have a well-trained physical response to a given moment, even if you're not playing exactly what the composer has written, you're playing something that the same physical impulses are being manifested. So I'm not thinking how would David solve this problem? The body that learned David's music will play this thing until I get back on again.
Mm,
So I think that's a kind of honest way of dealing with things. It circumvents the rational mind. You don't think, okay, how will I solve this? You solve it with the fused person that you have constructed that is part David Lang and part you. That is the person who's actually playing the piece, and that guy has got to figure out something to do, right? In this meantime, in the meantime. Normally, that's not what a mistake feels like to me, where
mm,
you come up empty, your memory fails you, or you just don't know what to do. It is a perturbation in the performance field where the thing that you imagine as you're playing, the kind of like shadow piece that goes on in your mind while you're playing the piece that everybody hears, that there's some deviation. Like you hit the side of a woodblock or you accidentally hit a cymbal on the way to something else.
mhm.
What do you do then to recenter yourself? What kind of person comes out of that experience? And is the ideal to go back to the person who hasn't made a mistake? Or frankly, is the ideal, and this is, I think, what you're getting at, to let the person who has just made the mistake be the person who plays the rest of the piece?
Mm,
One who has already accommodated something, who has dealt with a problem, who has figured out something that isn't supposed to be there. All the life skills that we say are important can be practiced in a piece of music. So just as though if you were living your life and all of a sudden you made a mistake, maybe it's even a big mistake, if that is the end of the performance, in other words, if you think, okay, no more living for me, then you haven't really understood what being alive is. The person who emerges from that difficulty, whether it's a mistake or a problem or it's something else, is the person who will forevermore have embedded in themselves that frailty or that tension or that whatever the result of the mistake is. That person is a stronger person than the person who has never made a mistake. Because the person who has never made a mistake is just the person who is about to. And,
I love that so much. I'm going to put that on a
and
t-shirt. That's amazing.
exactly. And so I think that the person who has made a mistake in a performance is also a stronger person than the person who's played it perfectly and hopes to get to the end without having anything happen.
Well, it's one of the things I try to impart on my students, and in particular, again at Soci, like, hey, listen, you're making no fewer or less mistakes than I make any day on a show. I'm just better at it than you. Like, I know how to move on, and I know where that mistake took me, and I know how to get back on track to know where I'm going. And you have to it's like, you got to keep shooting free throws. You got to get more at bats. Just keep swinging the bat, and you'll just get better at taking strikes. And reading what the next pitch is. And sorry for all the sports analogies, but your comment about the practice is the practice and the performance is the result of that. I think I think the first time when you said that, I was remembering us doing the Perez concert at Lincoln
Yeah.
Center years ago, and we were having coffee in the lobby there, and it was us, me, I think Doug and Todd were there, and the So guys, and we were all sitting around this table, and we were just sitting around, maybe having our coffee, eating a scone or something. And you were like, guys, check this out. And you like unfurled this scroll of paper that was this beautiful color pencil drawing of the entire concert, based on the
Oh, right. I remember doing
based on
that.
the dynamics and the just the structure of everything that Verez had dealt with. You sort of are like, I'm going to put this in color pencil on like a graph, and I'm going to set some parameters, and this is what we're going to do. And you were like, look at this, and in minute 37, can you believe it? Like, this happens here. And I was looking at you, I was like, this, I have never done anything like this. This is incredible. And I kind of thought like, well, we shouldn't play the concert. We should just frame this scroll and let everybody come by and look at it like this. The amount of time you put into that. Again, I think that's why the concert was. I don't remember the concert. I remember the scroll,
Yeah, that's interesting.
quite frankly.
The thing I remember about that concert was because the New York Philharmonic played the orchestral pieces, we played the kind of smaller pieces for the
Right.
most part
Right.
in Alice Tully Hall, and they played it in Avery Fisher the next night. And the schedule, the Lincoln Center Festival schedules was that side by side of our rehearsal schedule and the New York Philharmonic. And I think we might have put 4 or 5 weeks of rehearsal into that piece. So every day, dessert from the 10 to 12:30, et cetera. And the Philharmonic was blank. And you could scroll down fast, you could see all of this stuff. And then the 2 days before the concert, then they rehearse it. And I thought, oh wow. This is the first time I kind of imagined that people would actually even want to play music like that without living with it forever and ever, because the living with it was the important thing. That graph, by the way, I remember doing, and I made it as 1 inch equals 1 minute for a 3 hour concert. So it was several big
Yeah. Yeah.
pages. And I wanted to see what were the main points of that concert, because, with Varese, there are just so many explosions. And if they all sound the same, then you come into this kind of like, strange paralysis of too many climaxes. So I wanted to say, like, what was the high point of the entire concert in terms of the intensity of the sounds, the volume? What was the low point? Where were we going to kind of put these kind of formal anchor points for the concert? That was the initial reason for doing that. And it was kind of, I've done that with Messiaen Canyons of the Stars, also a big like room size graph of the piece, just to understand something that was really too big to get your head around by just thinking about it.
Do you still have it?
I do.
Is it framed or is it in some tube somewhere?
It's in a storage room
Oh,
someplace.
Steve, get that out and have it framed.
Yeah.
I would come. I would fly out to UCSD just to see it. Uh,
I'll later today I'll dig around and I'll find it.
I wanted to sort of now turn the page a little bit and talk about what you had emailed me back
Yeah.
about. And if you don't mind, sort of just say, you've gone through some health issues, and
Yeah.
actually the email said something. I've had a triple bypass, and I'm practicing contacta. I don't think those words have ever been written in the history of humanity. So, Steve, how does it feel to have written words that no one else has written in the history of humanity?
That's funny to think of it that way, Josh. Thank you very much. Yeah, I wanted to bring it up because I think very often we have these conversations as professionally aged musicians, and that somebody who's younger just thinks, well, I mean, this is what they've always been able to do. There are no problems. Life somehow just never interferes, et cetera, et cetera. But I remember being a student and thinking, nobody's talking to me about how to sustain a life in music through the difficulties that eventually will happen. And they can be good difficulties. They can be, having a family and buying a house, things that, take you, that take energy from your practice room time. It can be good. It can be good things. And it can be other kinds of things. But I just never, I thought that my education was directed at someone who was going to be perpetually young, perpetually acrobatic, and never have a health issue or anything like that. So the reason I suggested sharing this is to show that it can happen, and in fact did happen to me. And so the nuts and bolts of the story very quickly are that I had coronary artery disease this year, and I've been very conscious of this because my dad died young, in his early 60s, too young, of a heart attack. And so I've been conscious of testing myself, and I didn't want to do to my wife Brenda what my father had done inadvertently. Obviously, he didn't mean to die of a heart attack, but it was like we missed him. I miss him I think about him every day, and he's not around. And so I wanted to be careful. And so I about a year ago, started just feeling like a little bit more out of breath going up a hill. And I've always been in good physical condition, and I exercise a lot. So this was like, this doesn't happen to me. A little bit later, I noticed that it was harder for me to remember how, not I'm talking about memorizing music, which is again my practice. And so the same amount of effort, I think of why can't I nail this? And that and the kind of like chest sensations led me to some more serious testing, shall we just say. And eventually they said, look, you're going to have a surgery, that I had three arteries that were blocked at 80, 90, and 100%. And so, yeah, this was the most harrowing period of all of this was the 2 months leading up to the surgery because I was having chest pains every day. I was unsure of what I should or shouldn't do. I canceled concerts because also played some concerts in the middle of all of this, and so then it was exactly 12 weeks ago now that I had a triple bypass. And it went, look, this is a miraculous surgery. It's something that people do a lot. It's a surgery that I think now I've discovered a lot of people have had similar kinds of things, but it is still a big deal. And it was, a real open heart. I have a scar that runs from here to here, and they stopped my heart and put me on a heart-lung machine, and so my heart wasn't beating for 60 minutes or something like that.
Whoa.
The surgeon said at the pre-op meeting, usually it just starts by itself, so we're usually confident. And I thought, well, is there a plan B, by the way?
Well, it should remind you that like the way there are Steve Schicks of the heart too. There are people who spend all day mapping with colored pencils the way a heart beats, like so.
And I was lucky enough to work with one of them. And so to make a long story short, because I don't mean to bore people with my personal
no, not at all.
But medical thing, I was in the ICU for 4 days and then came home. And then the process of sort of trying to get back into shape a little bit of just literally being able to roll over in bed at first and then, little by little. And now at around the 2 month mark or so, I was able to be back in the studio. And but the point of the story is, first of all, that life is a part of living and not just it's not a life support system for practicing or playing music or playing concerts. It's its own thing. In fact, music is a part of life, not the other way around. And I had to decide at the age that I am, which as I said is 72, would this be the thing that I was okay, it's been a good run. Could I come back? Would I have the physical capacity to come back? And then the other thing is under the category of never waste a crisis. What profound changes in life might come out of such a moment? There's a before and after moment to this. April 23rd was my surgery. April 22nd, I wondered whether I was going to live through the day, and I'm not exaggerating. I'm not playing for drama here, but it was really like, is this going to be okay? April 24th, I was in the ICU, and so there's a before and after here. But we have our versions of that, right? I mean, there are lots of them, including some of the ones I met. I think the culture had one with the pandemic. And these are opportunities to reconsider or reinforce the life that you have had, depending on what. I feel, in a way, to think about the pandemic a little bit, that we wasted so many opportunities to say, how could life be different? I think we all kind of rushed back into retrieving what we had been doing before. Many of us did anyway. And so I didn't want to do that with surgery. And so for a long time, and it's only been 3 months, but I resisted throughout this process trying to fast forward to saying, by such and such a date, I'm going to be playing concerts. By such and such a date, I'm going to be back doing what I'm doing. And I held open the possibility, even if it were just for several weeks, of making bigger changes than that, of stopping to play or changing the kind of repertory that I played or any of those things. And I still hold open the possibilities of fundamental change. But I also realized that music is the sharpest tool I have in my life. It's the one that I've developed. It's the one I've honed and refined for now nearly 60 years. And so I'm also unwilling to put that tool down because the thing we use that tool, I mean, Kafka has this amazing line about developing an internal life that is a sharp axe with which to break free from the sea ice that surrounds and suffocates all of us. And so we need a tool for that. It doesn't come just because you want it to. You have to develop the skills to puncture the banality of life, to puncture the habitual responses to puncture the laziness of it all. And many people develop, I mean, we all develop slightly different tools, but you and I, as percussionists, among the other tools we have in our hand, have this art.
Mm.
And it's the sharpest tool that I have. And so I realized as I got better and started to recover, that I was not simply going to put that down when it was still sharp enough to do me some good. So
Mm.
I'll learn new pieces and new kinds of things. And Taishan Sori is writing an evening length piece for me for premiere in December, which I'm looking both forward to and I'm a little nervous about. And we talked about Bora Yoon, who has just written a piece, and there are a lot of new things. But I also think I have something to offer with a piece like Contacta, which is just over my left shoulder, which I've been practicing, and Watershed, which is over my right shoulder, which I've been
Mm.
practicing because I know them. And now this other person, this new person, this person that has had a pretty big health scare is going to play that. I'm not going to use this as a canvas to talk about my bypass surgery. I don't think there's anybody who's interested in that. But I don't mind being the person who has had bypass surgery, which is the reason I suggested
Mm.
speaking to you about it. And that is, it would be a lie to myself and to other people if I just presumed that nothing bad had ever happened to me and all I did was ever stay in a practice room and make this music. So coming back to Contacta, which I played for the first time in April of 1976, and being in dialogue with the 22-year-old who played that piece for the first time, a person who never dreamed that he would have heart disease,
Mhm. Mhm.
has been the most wonderful kind of conversation that I can imagine. I really like that person who played
Mm.
that piece for the first time.
Why?
The
Why
per
do you
who
why do you I mean, I like myself too, but like why do you say that? Why do you say that?
I love the person who played Contacta because it was the most exciting thing that he could find, not because I thought I'd get booked at this festival to do it or that I would
Mm.
impress people. It was like, this is the wildest thing that existed in my universe. And by the way, I was playing with this pianist James Avery, who died in 2009, whom I loved and who was a kind of mentor figure to me. And the idea that I could play that piece with that person was the only thing I cared about. And it was not a transaction
Mm.
for getting ahead in the world. I was pretty sure that nobody was ever going to be interested in hearing me play anything, and certainly not a piece as weird as Contacta. So I love the pureness of that moment of passion. And
I love thinking about the idea that if time travel were possible and you could go back and just like the first time 22-year-old Steve was practicing that piece, that 72-year-old Steve just kicks open the door and you're like, "Hi, you don't know me, but you do. But you don't know me
yeah,
right now." And you just slap him on the back and you go, "Keep cracking, kiddo." And then you
it's
leave the
going to
room.
be
Like,
okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Like if you could, and because anyway, that I would love for the time machine to exist for that, not to change history, but just to go back and remind history that like, yeah, you're right about this. Keep on it, you
But
know.
I would phrase it the other way. I wish the 22-year-old me would knock on my door now and tell me it was going to be okay. Because that person was
Oh.
fearless.
Mm.
That person didn't have anything in mind except living the most interesting life. And so that was the person like that. I guess it's me. I'll just tell the story without making it into this dramatic thing.
No.
Like I learned Kontakte by playing the Deutsche Grammophon LP, the one that has Gesang der Junglinge and the first 14 minutes of Kontakte, or the first 8 minutes of Kontakte, or something like that. And then you have to turn the record over. So I learned that piece by playing with the record and then quickly stopping, flipping it over, and running back to the setup so I could, keep going. And I practiced that piece for like 7 months, and I knew inside out. And so the first rehearsal with James Avery, and it was being attended by people that were going to coach me and help me through it because I never played it. Jim never spoke very much, and so the contact is 34 minutes long, 34 minutes and 10 seconds or something like that. And our rehearsal was 36 minutes in length. It consisted of a run through and a discussion of when we would next meet. And that was the fifth happiest day of my life, I have to say.
Don't overheat. Do what you got to do, and then get out of there.
Yeah, just like run through this piece that I've dreamed of playing with the person I dreamed of playing with and have him say, "Great, this is good. When do we meet next?" Like, Okay, I can die now.
That's amazing. I appreciate you telling that story. If you don't mind me asking, like, was there a moment during this health scare that you were? There's been moments in my life where I've been genuinely scared,
Mhm.
and it's really hard to talk about. And I'm curious for you, was there a moment where you were just like by yourself and genuinely afraid
Oh yeah.
through this whole
I
process?
was genuinely afraid every day for the 6 weeks leading up to my surgery, and praying that I would wake up in the morning. I'm sorry. I know this is not the kind of thing that you normally would say in a podcast, but
No,
it is
please.
really, really true. And I Brenda woke up in a start because I had breathed or something like that. I probably snored or something like that,
Hmm.
and she woke up and we thought we were going to go to the hospital. I said it's okay. This kind of level of
Hmm.
like what's going to happen to me was from roughly the second week of February, well, maybe the end of February through the middle of April was that. There were days that were less problematic, but there were most days that I ended with a prayer that I'd wake up in the next morning. And so that's kind of where I was.
Are you a religious person? Do you practice?
I am.
What do you practice? What's your
I was
denomination?
raised as a Christian, and that's still the standard you know touch point. But I also have had it really wonderful experiences with Buddhism and with
Mm.
Judaism, and so my spiritual practice is hybridized, but that's where I came from. I came out of the Protestant church.
Okay, my wife is a Lutheran pastor, and I grew up
Oh,
Catholic.
is she?
I grew up
Yeah.
Catholic, and she went to seminary, and she went to Union Theological Seminary in New York,
Oh,
and
great.
it's a non-denominational seminary, and so she was in school with Baptists, Jewish folks, Muslims, evangelical Christians, and then they were all taught by Cornell West. So it was like
Oh,
this
wow.
like
That would have been
amazing
amazing.
amazing like not, battle's the wrong word, but just getting in the room and sort of figuring out. And like she would come home every day and just say like, you know what, it turns out we kind of all believe the same thing, but we're just saying it in different ways. And anyway, I'm not a super religious person, but I have thought deeply about what it brings me, and just sort of
Yeah.
communing with people, thinking of yourself as not the only answer to everything, that sometimes putting a thought out into the world is a way of getting something off your chest and not carrying it around.
Yeah.
Anyway,
That's
so I don't want to go down the rabbit hole, but I appreciate you being candid on
Yeah,
that.
I think that that listening to Thich Nhat Hanh in the recovery period for me was really, really important. The Vietnamese Buddhist monk that now he's gone now, but there are numerous recorded examples of him speaking, and the idea of the ability to get out of your own way, or to just to be able to
Hmm.
stop what you're doing, and
Mm.
to connect with something deeper was a kind of daily meditation for me during the recovery period. So it is a kind of ecumenical sort of religion that I have, but it has become more important to me with passing years.
Well, it's something during the pandemic. I remember Stephanie coming home from one of her classes on Buddhism that she took in the seminary, and she came home. She's like, "Do you know? I heard that they have this phrase called 'tend the garden you can touch,'" and
Mm,
I was like, "That's incredible." And I've heard similar versions of it, but nothing as surgically
yeah,
poignant as that.
yeah,
And in these days right now, there's many problems in the world that we can all worry about. But when I go out and I pick a few weeds and I take my neighbor's trash cans in, like that's kind of the first step to dealing with the world's problems. And for you, whether it's making a pencil sketch of Oliver Perez's music, or really caring about your setup in a specific way, or being candid with me, I just like I don't even know that I have a final question for you, but I just this has been a really fascinating conversation, Steve, and I'm really glad you're healthy.
thank you. I am healthy. I have a new heart, and I've got the gift of another 20 years. So
That is just I'm very proud and happy for you, and I'm very proud to say that I know you. And maybe my last final sort of, just because I'll let you go, you got Contacted to learn, and
don't I ever? Yeah.
what is sort of like what's your to this day, what is your proudest moment on stage? And the thing that, like, if somebody came and said you only get to go back and see yourself play one show,
Yeah.
what would it be?
Well, I have there are a lot of concerts that I'm proud of. The one I did at Ojai, the solo concert, I think was good. The Kennedy Center concert we talked about was really good. But the proudest moment was this, and I will try to get through this without getting teary, but it's almost
It's
impossible.
okay.
And that is not playing percussion, but conducting. And I was conducting, quite a lot and conducted the La Jolla Symphony for 17 years. And the La Jolla Symphony is a very, very high level amateur orchestra. So we played Amerique Varese, for example, Xenakis Metastasis. We did a lot of stuff. And I conducted all the Beethoven symphonies with them, which was just like I never thought this was going to happen to me. The conducting turned out, it was my midlife crisis. I just sort of did it on a
Some people buy a Corvette, some people get a baton.
exactly, exactly. And so I did the Beethoven Ninth, and there's a moment in the last movement in which Beethoven, who is kind of the master of the short crescendo and leading up to something, and it is the horn goes ya da doo da, and then it changes keys ya da da da, and then there's a two-bar crescendo into the biggest rendition of the Ode to Joy that there is. Everybody, and I had this idea that during the two-bar crescendo, that I would have the chorus stand. So they wouldn't be standing to give this away, but we would hold that soft moment and then they would stand. Now, this is an amateur orchestra and chorus, and the chorus average age, I don't know, 75 or something like that. Not everybody was young, let's put it that way. And there were a group of people in the front who just didn't have mobility, and so they would come on early and they'd sit, and they wouldn't stand up and down with the chorus, and they would sit. But I gave the cue to stand, and this woman who could barely get up took her 20 bars, but she rose to sing. And it was the single most moving thing that has ever happened to me. This courage, this sense of being buoyed by the thing that was so important that you would do anything to do. And in that moment, and of course the soundtrack was pretty good, it was just stunning to me. And so the success of that moment was creating an environment in which this one person could do the most courageous thing she might ever have done.
Did you talk to her afterwards?
I gave her a look that she knew that we did, but I didn't want to ruin it for her. I didn't want to make her into my story. It was her story at that time, so I just nodded at her and smiled, and we were good.
Well,
That was a good one.
I'm getting a little Steve, and I think yes, maybe a lot of podcasts don't end this way, but there's no such thing as the idyllic podcast or the idyllic farm or the idyllic performance. And I think the humanity that I think you've brought to our art form, but to your teaching every time I come across one of your students, either at SOCI or just out in the world, and your generosity of spirit just in this last hour with me, I will forever be grateful for. And I really hope we cross paths sooner than later, and I hope I get to give you a big hug and maybe mess up some Varese on stage for you.
Yeah.
And
Hey, let's do that. And may I say in return, the idea of watching you, whom I've known for so long, in a context in which you are changing and shaping the world, also does my heart literally good. So thank you very much for the work you're doing and the students that you have and your colleagues. And so. Give them my best. I'm still giving very ginger hugs, but one's coming your way the next time.
We'll start with a fist bump, and if you want to go deeper than that, we can certainly
I'll
go
be
deeper.
healed by that point.
Well, Steve Schick, again, thank you so much for your time. I'll let you get back to Contacta, and I hope the Tai Shansori piece and the Boryun piece sort of bear amazing fruit for you and for them. And until next time.
Until next time, thank you for inviting me. It's good to talk to you.
My honor, Steve. Thank you. Okay. I don't know about you, but I'm sort of dabbing away a few tears from the eye, and you should know that's totally okay. I had many times in my life where I've got teary-eyed, and the older I get, the less I care, and I just want to sort of embrace it because it feels really great, and I'm super, super, super thankful to Steve for sharing that with us and with me. Also, his stories about dealing with his health issues and all of it really resonated with me. So I hope you enjoyed that conversation. I hope you are doing well. And until next time, all right, take care. Bye.